any changes he was making were still in keeping with the like original intent and with like the spirit of the show. And so yeah, it does feel good that, you know, we've got all the people kind of like looking over our shoulder saying, yeah, that's it, that's right, or no, that's not it.
Little Shop of Horrors is such a silly show. I mean, it's such a silly show, but beyond that, it's a really joyful show. Even though, like, you know, it's about a man-eating plant that that sort of takes over the world. Like, there's a real joy in the performance of the show, and to have the importance of that joy imparted to us, like as part of the original intent. It gives such importance to what we're doing with a silly show, and the importance of silliness and joy in general.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. We're your hosts, Adam Krutinger
and Cameron Garrity.
And today we have on the show Eric Wright and Teddy Udane. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us.
It is so good to have you here. Eric and Teddy are part of the cast of Little Shop of Horrors, which is reopening tomorrow on Broadway on Little Shop Day. You can see it at the West Side Theater at 43rd and 9th, and we are so excited to have them here to talk about the show and their own backgrounds as puppeteers in their own right. Eric and Teddy, welcome to Puppeteers.
Hi, thanks for having us.
We should probably let the audience know, too, like, what does Little Shop Day mean? Is it just because the show's opening this day? I think some people who know the movie and the show really well will know, but others might not. What is it, Cam?
Well, we should have you guys.
Oh yeah, why don't you guys tell us what is Little Shop Day?
I'm just a schmuck in a green shirt.
You sure are. You should have worn green today.
I should have worn green too.
I know. Oh yeah, I'm very off-brand right now in my blue shirt. Well, Little Shop Day it references the very first line of the show, which is on the 21st day of the month of September. It sets up the whole show for when all of the strange events of the script come to pass.
Yeah, it's when it's when the butterfly's wings flap that then start the tidal wave.
That's right.
Right. And I love, because so much of Broadway has opened this past week, and it was kind of like this wonderful little bit of branding that Little Shop, opened a couple days later, but to really capitalize on like, hey, we have our own day, so why not do that?
I mean, really smart move. I think we were all thinking during the shutdown when we were all crossing our fingers that Broadway would reopen and that our show would come back. We were thinking, oh man, it would be such a smart idea if they reopened on the 21st day of the month of September, and it would be a huge deal, and the audience is going to go crazy, and it would just be great. So it's really very exciting.
Yeah, the first time we opened 2 years ago, the audience went absolutely nuts on the 21st. I mean, they were just roaring in the audience, and the energy was so palpable. And so to experience that again in this, like with this sort of like everything else behind it, it's going to be pretty incredible. But I think it speaks to the passion of the producers and their love for the source material, which has been kind of something that we've understood from the very, very beginning. Is they're so respectful of the material, and so like this was deeply on their minds as well, and it just shows how much that they love it and how much they're connected to it.
Oh, totally. Well, and especially this was not the first time that they announced a reopening date for the show, right? I mean, all through COVID, it was kind of just like, in another couple months, and the finish line kept getting pushed back. So for it to like finally be this like really great, resounding, this is the day, just has a plethora of different meanings to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really great. And it's really great to be back in rehearsal and, like really making it real and, being there with everybody. And it just, I don't know, there was this moment when we had I think it was on our first day when we gathered everybody in the production together, all of the cast and crew and production staff, and everybody was in the house, and we all went around the circle and introduced ourselves, and then at the end, everybody like clapped for everybody else. And I like kind of had this moment which was like, what is this sound and why do I feel so happy? Oh wait, it's applause. That's right. Oh God.
And it's not just me clapping at myself in my apartment.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And just like
someone blinking their clubhouse icon.
Yeah, exactly. And like being like even just hearing applause on, like watching a live concert or something is one thing, but it's like being in the room and feeling it it's total. It's like it's the difference between watching fireworks on TV and like watching it in real life and being there. It's really. I didn't really realize how much that would impact me. It was really nice.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's awesome. Now, one thing I wonder is so when you guys shut down earlier, and then now you're back open, does it feel like a new show? I imagine there's some people that may not have come back, and also I imagine much of the procedure is very different, given maybe possibly some restrictions and whatnot. How much of it feels like you're doing the same production?
Very much of it, actually. Honestly, we had the first few weeks where we were kind of stepping into it slowly, readdressing the music. There are a few new people who are involved. We've got they've added a couple of vacation swings for certain tracks to, as they've said, sort of like deepen the bench because everyone is aware that people might be out for 10 days or more, and so they are taking steps to like add that coverage and so like we are catching people up, but for the most part it is very much the same team that was getting ready, that was about to perform when we shut down. On the day that we shut down, we were in the middle of the final rehearsal for a bunch of new people, for our new Seymour, for a new Voice of Audrey 2, a new Urchin, and so they were just about to go on like the next day when we got the call that it's not happening tonight, everyone go home, and we'll talk about it, we'll figure it out later. So it actually so it, in a sense, it does feel new with those people, but as we've been getting back into rehearsal and running it, it feels like slipping into an old pair of shoes, honestly, in the best possible way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very familiar.
That's so great to hear.
And actually,
totally.
one thing that I pointed out to Eric, and I think we sort of agree on, is that for us too, it was our first. We were about to get a new Voice of Audrey 2, which was a bit of a concern for us because we'd gotten into a rhythm. We'd performed over 150 shows with this guy, Kingsley Leggs, who was the incredible voice of the plant, and we'd really gotten into his rhythms, and it was in our bodies, and we were a little nervous that he wasn't going to be like with a new person, and it's happening. And with this time off, it actually, I think it made it a little bit easier to be ready to listen to him better and get it back in our bodies and sort of reset it in a way that I don't think would have necessarily happened as easily beforehand.
Yeah,
That's right. I forgot about that. It's kind of a unique problem that only your position has. Such reliance on someone else's dialogue and performance. That's really interesting. Holy cow.
Yeah. I often describe Audrey 2 as a three-person character because, we are in the smallest stages. Pod 1 is just me making kissy noises and operating the puppet. And, when we get to Pod 3, we're a two-person puppet with whoever's in Pod 3 that day and the voice. And then by the time we get to Pod 4, it takes both Teddy and I to operate, and Aaron Harrington now on the voice, being perfectly in sync to bring that character to life. And so it really is like all three of us are making decisions about the character. All three of us are, we're led by whoever is in that voice position. Like he is our leader, but we are all a team making decisions about how the scene will go and how the character should be played, which is really, that's one of the like collaborative parts of being in puppetry. It's like this job is one of the most collaborative kinds of performance, which is just a delight to work with.
Oh, for sure. You know what? I'm realizing now that we didn't actually at the top of the show break down which roles you guys perform. Obviously, it's puppeteers, so you have hands in Audrey too. But can you just fill the audience in, because I know you have additional roles beyond just wiggling the dolly.
Yeah. So in the show, I start out the show. I play the derelict, which is one of the denizens of Skid Row. And then after that, I will jump back and forth between Pod 3, which is the puppet that sings "Get It" or "Feed Me," and then Pod 4, which is the largest version of Audrey 2. And I also understudy Oren, the dentist, and the roles that track plays as well. So those are my duties on the show.
That's interesting. So you understudy Oren. First of all, that's awesome. That's a
Yeah.
great part.
Yeah.
And secondly, like then don't they need an understudy for you too? Then because like
Yes.
if Oren's out, then you go. It just leaves another hole.
It does, and this has not happened yet where I've been on as Oren, but I have had to miss a show, and we so yeah, when I'm out, then that means that one of the other understudies who's it's their job to understudy both Seymour and the dentist. They sing backstage, but then they get trained to do some of the puppetry duties. They'll go on as the derelict, but then they'll kind of be the support role in Pod 4, which then unfortunately leaves Eric in the position of playing both the lead of Pod 3 and Pod 4. But it's so far it's only been one of those things that's been like one night or maybe 2 nights. It's something that we're in conversation with about the production to make better and make more sustainable.
There's
more
not like an
sustainable solution.
emergency box that you break open and there's like a direct line to Marty Robinson.
A direct line to Marty Robinson, yeah.
I'm
we call
surprised
it our telephone monster.
Yeah. No, that's surprising. I wouldn't have thought that, and maybe this is how it's done traditionally when it's done in big houses, but that pods 3 and 4 would have a different puppeteer.
Yeah, well, that's mostly done for a sustainability reason. So in the show, I perform pod 1 because of how we stage our particular show. Often in other productions of Little Shop, the derelict and pod 1 will be an interchangeable role or the same person playing both roles. And in our production, because of how we stage it, I'm always pod 1, Teddy's always the derelict. The person who plays Seymour is the next size up of Audrey 2. They puppeteer pod 2, and then pod 3 is the sort of body-sized pod. So Teddy and I will take turns each day for who is in pod 3 and who is piloting pod 4. We call it a pilot because we really feel like, it's a whole body. Pod 4 is as big as a Mini Cooper. It's a huge puppet, and it is it has this enormous steel boom support arm, which has a 100-pound counterweight on the back end of it. And so whoever's in pod 3, then, like Teddy mentioned, is the support role or the boom operator for pod 4. And then we switch off day to day because the roles are so physically demanding and so physically, not necessarily physically taxing, but very physically demanding for sustainability reasons and to keep our bodies from getting in a rut. We switch off every day. Who's leading pod 3, who's leading pod 4.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
I was going to say that was a tip that was given to us from the Monkey Boys, who were puppet consultants on this project and worked on the Broadway production and then subsequently the tour. And it's their they help with the building process, and so they were the ones who kind of said you're going to want to switch off, and they gave us some great pointers on how to make the longevity work for us.
Sustainable.
That's great. Yeah. Are
sustainable,
you
yeah.
using Monkey Boy puppets? Yeah.
It was a really fascinating build for this show. So because as I understand it, the production sort of came up in a very condensed kind of way. Typically, Monkey Boys have built a bunch of different rental sets that they rent to productions all over the country. And as I understand, it usually takes about a year to build a full set of Audrey 2 puppets. And I think they didn't have that time for this production going into rehearsals. But they had an excellent puppet designer, Nicholas Mahon, who's been a part of the production from the beginning. And he brought in Monkey Boys, and kind of the only way to solve this problem, I think, is that basically Nicholas designed a reskinning of Monkey Boys rental set. And so it would match our production and fit in with the aesthetic of our show. And the great part about that is that that means there is a huge amount of institutional knowledge about how to work the puppets. A lot of times when you're making creating new puppets for a production, there's a learning period where it's like, how do these puppets actually work in practice, and what's going to break, or what's the best way to operate them, or what's there's a little bit more figuring out. When we came into rehearsal for this production, they were like, the skeletons of the puppets are essentially the same. They're essentially the ones that Monkey Boys have been using for years and years. So the basic knowledge of how to use them and the safest way to use them and the best way to use them for, like Teddy was saying, for a longer production was already there. And Monkey Boys really worked with us during the rehearsal process originally to, train us and the production on how that was going to work. So that was a huge benefit. And it's really great. Like, we kind of, Monkey Boys had built their rental sets after being a part of the Broadway production back in 2003, I believe, with Martin Robinson. And Martin Robinson is the original designer and performer of Audrey 2 in the 1985 production of Little Shop when it was off Broadway. And so, like, that, there's a direct line of institutional knowledge about the puppetry from Martin to the Monkey Boys to us in this show.
That's awesome. Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's cool to feel connected to it in that deep way.
Yeah.
Martin
Pod
actually
4? Is Pod 4 also based off of the Monkey Boy like skeleton too?
That's right.
I know sometimes people do like more built-in things for it and whatnot, but that's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, and again, it really offers, you kind of are able to, because we're using a known quantity in this puppet and how this puppet works, you're able to kind of jump to the next step of how does it fit in the space and what can you do with it, rather than, in a lot of other productions where you're building from scratch, you kind of have that figuring out period that can take a lot of time and money, and it can result in something very unique. But in this case, we were able to prioritize the speed and the finished quality that we knew knew was going to happen. We just had to learn how to use it.
Yeah, I mean, it made the rehearsal process very, very easy because we already had a fully skinned puppet, and with the vines and with the pants that we wear for Pod 3 and everything, and so everyone could see this is basically it. It's going to be a different color. It'll look slightly different, but like this is it. So it got us ahead of the ball in a great way.
Yeah,
I love that. And what's cool is, you mentioned sort of this institutional memory on the puppet side of things. What, if any, was there on the actual like production and musical side of things? Because I believe like you guys had some time with Alan Menken, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
There was a great
that
presence.
Wow.
It was very cool. Alan came to visit right at the top of rehearsals and sort of talked to us all about where the production came from and the origins of it and the sort of deeper connection to the world of this show. And he also worked with us on the recording of the cast album. And so that sound is also like he had a hand in that sound. And we also had connection to folks connected to Howard Ashman. Howard's sister, Sarah, and Howard's partner were both present at many of the rehearsals and dress rehearsals. And, again, we're sort of connecting us to that original, that original creation of the show and why it's important and why we need it and like the best way to approach it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and not only that, but one of our lead producers, Tom Curtihy, had gone to see the original production and at the Orpheum and had these really deep memories and this deep love for it. And he talked about it at such an important time in New York City and what this production meant to him as like the AIDS crisis was kind of swirling around that part of Manhattan and in the world. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it really kind of all gave us a context, and it was really incredible to we really felt like being in the room with Alan, for example, we were like, he's the guy. He wrote the music. We're practically here with him.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we do have there are some new orchestrations in the show by our musical director Will Van Dyke, and he was working closely with Alan as well to make sure that any changes he was making were still in keeping with the original intent and with the spirit of the show. And so it does feel good that we've got all the people kind of looking over our shoulder saying yeah, that's it, that's right, or no, that's not it, it needs to be a little bit more of this.
I think the biggest part that I really noticed about all of that too was that, you know, in a lot of ways, Little Shop of Horrors is such a silly show. I mean, it's such a silly show, but beyond that, it's a really joyful show. Even though, like, you know, it's about a man-eating plant that that sort of takes over the world. Like, there's a real joy in the performance of the show, and to have the importance of that joy imparted to us, like as part of the original intent, like, is so important. It gives such importance to what we're doing with a silly show, and the importance of silliness and joy in general. And I think that has been that set the tone right from the first day that we were playing together, and that everybody in the cast was there to play together and find the silliest things, the funniest things, the best things, the most emotional connections, we were all really started building this very tight knit group of people in the cast and crew and production, and like everybody there is really there to play together, and it's a really great feeling. It's an incredible feeling to come to work to every day, especially when we were in rehearsals, just like spending all this time just like figuring out what was the most fun thing to do. And now that we have a set show, coming in and giving this joyful thing to the world, it really is an incredible feeling.
That's great. Did you guys have much experience with the show before this too? Had you been part of other productions of it in any way?
Teddy had. I had no prior experience with Little Shop, but Teddy, you had.
Yeah, I had just before this production, I had finished another production up at the Cape Playhouse, where I was the only puppeteer on the show. And a year before that, I had done another production at another theater in Cape Cod, the Monomoy Theater, which was this theater connected to Hartford University. So it was a lot of students, and I was working very closely with an artist up there, Dennis Predovic, and we built the puppet ourselves. It was his design, and we built it, and I operated it. I was kind of with a lot of like college students being around, I was sort of the professional puppeteer ringer that was being brought in to help with the production.
Puppetry master, Teddy.
Puppetry master, yeah. It was. That was the first year I'd gone to the O'Neill as well. So like I spent a week at the O'Neill, and I felt like I was coming in and that I was like Philip Huber, basically to these kids.
That's great.
Yeah, but it was. So I had done it twice before, and
great.
Yeah, and it was so it was great. I felt really comfortable coming in for this rehearsal, having just done it like a month prior.
Right. Yeah. No, I guess that kind of answers my question. I was going to ask if you felt like it helped in any way. I'm sure there's aspects of it that help, without a doubt, of course, being very familiar with the show. But I know that sometimes even some directors and whatnot, they don't always like to use people who have been part of other productions, and maybe it's different for a puppeteer, I'm sure, but just to really make it their own in some way, because again, like you said, it is a really funny show, but so many people do this show in so many different ways too. Some people make it extra dark. Some people play up the comedy. Some people make it super colorful. Other people make it super almost like haunted looking. So there's so many different ways.
Some people just do the movie on stage.
And not to mention too, I mean, the puppetry, I mean, like you guys were saying earlier, if you have a different set of puppets, it's probably, you may as well be doing a completely different show in a way. And not to mention the different performers too. Like I've been part of many productions of Little Shop. Sometimes we have female voices, male voices, and even just having different performers do it again, as well as though I imagine there's still some amount of style they're keeping the same within the aesthetic of the show. But from production to production, I mean, it can drastically change.
Yeah, I think that, right from day one, there was a sense that what we were there to do was to create was to be faithful to the original. Not to recreate the original, but to be faithful to the spirit of the original production. The original one that was in the East Village at the Orpheum, that is the show that we wanted to bring back. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with Julian Crouch, the set designer, about that idea. Was like, how do you approach that kind of a thing? How do you bring back this thing that everybody has seen, everybody has some idea, or many people have a very strong idea of like what it should be. And he said that his approach was that he was recreating what people remember, not what actually was. And once he sort of reframed it as being that his job was to bring the memory there, not to actually like recreate the original puppets, which, as we all know, like every puppet that gets constructed has its own, it could be improved, or it has things that get put in at the last minute, or it can be updated or changed or whatever. But people remember that feeling that they get when they see those puppets, or the feeling that they get when they're in an intimate space, with Skid Row. And that's what we're setting out to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that with the show too, as far as like the puppetry goes, there are so many things that are sort of baked in that you can't ignore. Like this plant has to sing this song, that has this tempo and these words, and it's got this attitude, and it's got to eat people. It's got to it's got to chomp on Audrey at this point. There's certain things that like are sort of baked into it that you can't get around unless you like really, really break the mold and get creative. Like there was, while we were doing our production, there was that wonderful production at the Pasadena Playhouse where they took Pod 4 or like, Audrey 2 in like a totally different direction by the end of the show. I think they were using like shadows and things like that. And they got really innovative, but I think that's maybe the only way to like truly do something out of the box is to like totally break the mold, because otherwise some of this stuff is so baked in with there's just like the hard facts of like what does Audrey 2 have to do and what does she have to say. Part of what makes it so easy is that so much of it is set to music, and I think that was a conscious effort on the part of the original creators. Like after doing it for years and years and years, I think like Marty probably was like, this is the way we're going to get the best repeatable product.
Well, yeah, there's some really amazing. You can really tell when you get into it. And Martin pointed some of this out to us as well when he came to visit the show. You can tell that this is a show that was written to have puppets in it because of the structure of the show. Like again, like really baked into it. There's every time that one of the things Martin pointed out to us was that every time the pod changes size, there is. It is introduced on stage and it is still like it doesn't move the first time you see it. And so the audience has time to like adjust to the fact that it's a new puppet of a different size and readjust to the idea that it's a plant and not, a living, breathing person on the inside. Right. And then you get set up for a surprise each time this puppet starts to move. Pod 1 is completely still until it starts to move. Pod 3, is in a bunch of different scenes and it wilts and it there's all of these sort of cues written into the show to make you forget that it's a puppet and that it's just a plant just sitting there. And it's those kind of things that you don't really realize in other productions that might have puppetry incorporated into them or designed with them, but like the very fabric of the show has puppetry in it, and that makes it like it's just I think it's one of the great puppet shows of American theater for that reason. It's like it centers around a strong character puppet, like it relies on the fact that this is a show with puppetry in it, to create this magic, to like create this world. And, you really need those skills to bring this to life, which is really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, and right down to, I think, when the plant isn't on stage, like the scenes that are written to make sure that like there's time to get Pod 4 onto the stage or like to get someone into a costume. I remember there was a version that you were involved in I forget exactly the
my
details,
gosh,
but they didn't. Was it that they didn't have a curtain or something? So like
Ego.
all the time,
It's ego.
all the time that should have been used in that scene
Well, that's
to
what-
like get a puppeteer
Yeah.
in to the thing, they then like went dark. So there was just like you were sitting in
Well,
the
even
audience
like we did
waiting.
when we were writing our own show, when we were writing Snow Monster, like we designed certain scenes to be able to cover some scenes in front of the curtain, so we can get things ready behind. And
Yeah.
the same Little Shop is designed that way.
That's
It
right.
goes from the shop to the street, and some other little places too.
Right.
Again, so you can get it set up. But I was part of one production where they didn't want to do that for some reason, and oh my gosh, we had again. Whenever I'm part of a show, I make sure that there's no wait time between scene changes. Again, that's how it's designed. We had scene change one that was 5 minutes waiting in the dark. It was bad. It was bad. The production was okay. It was fine production, but oh my gosh, yeah.
I do kind of love that, though. I mean, that makes me think of like my roots, like growing up, like doing community theater, and just like it seems almost like very formal in a way that I kind of like. I think we're almost spoiled now with like these very inventive scene changes. Like maybe there is something kind of nice about just like watching a bunch of people wearing their black come out and like, you know, move some furniture very methodically. They're not stuffing their hands. It's like it's almost like a dance in and of itself.
Yeah. One thing I want to say for my production, if that was the restriction, yes. The problem was ego of the designer. Okay, I didn't want the curtain background. So it's a background of a realistic set of a shop. And then for street, a curtain? That makes no sense.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh. They wanted a backdrop in front of like, there's no way. It was a small theater. Anyway, I'm sorry. I gotta get off my soapbox. But I do have another little soapbox I want to stand on.
Yeah.
And actually, even in your little story talking about how it's perfectly made for puppetry, which I do believe, and I think you guys made perfect points. But I
Yeah.
noticed you conveniently skipped over Pod 2.
Yeah.
I have I hate Pod 2.
You do?
So much. I think I do.
You mean
I
like the
kinda- well, I shouldn't
concept of
hate-
Pod 2?
Well, from a story, from creating of this magical world,
Yeah.
like you said, each puppet is still, and it's never and this is partially director's choice what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about a lot of productions that I've been a part of and seen.
Sure.
But a lot of time when Seymour's walking around with it, it's alive.
Yeah.
And like and around other people, and I feel like Pod 2, in most ways I've ever seen it performed, kind of breaks that illusion of it like really having personality. Because especially Pod 1, Pod 1, it just wants to eat. I mean, there's
Right.
no necessary inkling that this is going to start talking and be like a sentient in some way, right? It's
Yeah.
just maybe it's just like a giant fly trap.
Right.
And then Pod 2, most productions kind of make it really goofy, trying to bite the doo-wop girls and stuff, and just being really goofy. And then Pod 3, again, it starts off like a surprise that this thing's alive, but Pod 2 just tends to make a joke out of it.
Well,
So,
I mean, it
again,
is
I'm
a
not
comedy
speaking about
show.
your production in any way. I'm
No,
just
right.
talking about
No.
I think what you're probably seeing is that Pod 2 is the pod that is puppeteered by the person playing Seymour.
Yes.
And not necessarily like if a production does bring puppeteers in to do the puppets in the show, which they should, and it makes a difference. Pod 2 is performed by Seymour, and that person is brought in for other reasons. Now we really lucked out in our production right off the bat when Jonathan Groff originated the role for our production. It turns out he also is a great puppeteer. Like, is there anything this boy can't do? It's really frustrating, honestly, because he's good at so much other stuff. Can't he leave me this one thing? But he like picked up the puppetry instantly, and got what makes good puppetry and how to perform it, and like you sort of have to also add that skill into the person who's playing Seymour, and not everybody can do that. And I think that Pod 2 is where you see the distinction between people who can perform puppetry and people who maybe need some more practice. And I think you also see like you're saying, Adam, the way that it's handled on stage, the way that you approach the idea of having a puppet alive on stage makes a difference. And if you like, I just remember some of the notes that we were working on the other day with Seymour is that no one else should see the puppet be alive. And so one of the jokes in in that song is supposed to be this sort of like, it's alive when no one's looking, and then it's a plant when people are looking at it. And so like, if that's the joke that you set up for the scene, or if that's the comedy that you're playing, if that's the clown bit you're playing, that's a whole set of beats and actions and choreography that you need to like have very clear and crisp in order for that to work. Because we're talking about clown work. We're talking about like the difference between seeing and not seeing, and we're talking about the very difficult puppetry of performing a puppet next to performing a puppet while the puppeteer is also a separate character. That's a whole other skill.
Oh yeah.
That ventriloquists have really developed really well, but not all puppeteers necessarily have that either. The ability to like create the illusion that you are not puppeteering this thing that you're playing next to. So it is a really difficult scene to do, and I think that's why it often falls flat, or it often doesn't play well.
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to kind of like making that choice about what game are you going to play. Are you going to go for the cheap, I'm going to try and bite their tushies joke, or are you going to like keep it within the world? And I think that ultimately like what the success of any like production of Little Shop kind of relies on is like, are you just going to go for the kind of cheap, more obvious sort of laughs?
Is it a gag? Yeah.
Is it a gag, or are you gonna really try and find like the humanity of these people and like the humor in their circumstances? Instead of just
that's one thing I keep wondering too. Like, if I was to direct it, how would I do it? And I almost think I would maybe make it a prop or something. Because again, what I really don't like that. Maybe I got to see more productions. I've never seen a production that haven't given that puppet a personality, which again is taking away from the reveal of Pod 3 in some way. I'm probably overthinking it. I know I'm overthinking
it. But it's an interesting problem to address in the production and with the puppetry in general, because I do think you need something between Pod 1 and Pod 3. Yes. Right? You need some kind of middle stage. And so and you need to go from this little baby bird that only wants to eat and like could never have you can't even imagine it having a bit of a personality, to maybe seeing a shadow of a personality at the end of Pod 1's scene when it like grows up and like sort of sees the room for the first time, to Pod 3, which is singing and dancing and like really menacing. And I feel like trying to figure out what that middle stage is a really interesting challenge. And I think it's one of the many challenges in this show, but especially for the puppetry, I think it is a really big one.
It's this great, like, catchy kind of like cha-cha number with the urchins as well. And so not only are you trying to show the plant and show some puppetry in like the best possible way, but you also have to highlight the urchins and show off what they do best as well. Like, it's trying to show everybody at their best at the same time. And so it is a dance within the dance of of like making sure everybody is like just doing what they're there to do to serve this, to move the story forward.
That's one of the great parts about this show, is that it has a hidden depth to it in how you in how you approach it and how you stage it, in that you can really like what's written in the show, you can really mine that for some really incredible moments. You can really there is some really difficult puppetry that's a part of this. There's you can really make some difficult choreography. You can like really have it be a showcase for your actors, for your dancers, for this little cast. And it also kind of works if you just play the top level. It's still a good show when it's a silly show. Like that I think speaks to the strength of the writing and the strength of the songs and like the strength of the story on its own, is that you can play the top level and it works fine, but it also allows for mining those depths to get to a deeper connection, and that makes it life-changing, makes it so much more enjoyable, so much more impressive, and it's really fun to give ourselves those challenges.
Oh, without a doubt. And yeah, I think that's also we've talked about this before on the show, but like there's a lot of fun in seeing like really bad theater, because you get to you get to kind of think what that director's brain and be like, oh, I would have done it differently, or this,
Sure.
and it reveals things about the story, and the construction and the blocking and all those things that, allows you, when you do have that opportunity to do it on Broadway,
That's right.
To take it in a different way. I did want to just talk about Pod 2 quickly, because when we had Martin Robinson on the first time,
yeah.
he actually talked about the fact that I think it was Howard wanted Pod 2 to be this thing where the it was a puppet that got placed down on the set by Seymour in different places, and the puppeteer would be running from behind, a desk and getting their arm into it, and then
Sure,
crawling
right.
onto the stage to another part, and then getting back in the puppet.
Sure.
And it was Martin's idea to say, like, hey, you know what, like, there's this wonderful ventriloquist in Australia, with an emu puppet who does it this way, and why don't we solve it with that?
Yeah,
and
with
so
the fake arm illusion.
the fake
Yeah,
arm
it's
illusion,
amazing.
exactly. And so it was that actually made, kind of put Pod 2 in this place where it was Seymour's role versus the puppeteers. And
Yeah.
so then it really is that, of like deciding what game
So
you're
pretty
gonna
much
play.
I have to blame Marty Robinson for my the part.
I gotta
I
say
do
it.
just want to plug for people listening. Make sure you do check out that episode with Marty Robinson too. We go a lot into the depth of the history of Little Shop and how he was started part of the beginning. So
Yeah.
just as a little side note.
I gotta say though,
um,
it's a little surprising to hear that Martin Robinson would choose anything but the most challenging version of a solution. I
just
feel like
wanted a break.
he's the guy
He
that's
just
like,
wanted to
what's
be
the,
like-
what's the hardest way to do this? What's the way that only I can do this? Okay, that's gonna be the way.
Yeah. Well, he made it hard on the Seymour performer.
Exactly.
And I would love to talk about just your backgrounds a little bit, just respectively as puppeteers. But I do also just want to ask you, because we've been saying all these things about how, Little Shop is a show that so many people know, and you're restricted by what the puppets are, especially if they're, puppets that have been potentially designed for other versions of the productions being put up. How do you make it your own as the puppeteers in either the performance or the manipulation, or like how do you find ownership for yourselves and also making the production that you're in unique for audiences and fresh for the people who are coming to see it?
That's a really good question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Tony.
Well, I mean, it's also interesting because we're sharing the role. So, like, we kind of went into it side by side and saying, okay, we're gonna try this move here. We'll do this. We'll do that, and sort of like referring to one another, going back and saying like, okay, what do we think we should do? Shaping the performance. But as the performances have gone on, we have sort of like slowly diverged in some ways in certain places, with particularly with Pod 3, because that's the one that we're in by ourselves. But it's really amazing, like having like the kind of same starting seed, the same starting place, and then seeing where that branches off, just by virtue of like our two separate personalities as performers and kind of what we're responding to. And so I guess in that way, like making it our own. I think part of that has to do with like the voice of the plant. We deal with whatever they're giving us, and so that is keeping it fresh and like a fresh take on a read, or how they say a certain line, or if they growl versus whether they kind of giggle to themselves. I know that like we're always looking for new things, and so at least for me as a performer, that like I'm always trying to find a place where I can add another chuckle in there somewhere. And so they're like, for me, I'll throw in a little gesture. Just the other day, I kind of added this moment where I crossed my legs when they're dressed as vines, and had like a little moment, a little huffy moment in Get It, and that got a great laugh from the audience, and we were like, okay, maybe we'll keep this. So I think that's a place where like, your own personality comes out in the performance of the puppet.
Well, yeah. I mean, that moment is a perfect example of the kinds of things that have happened throughout the entire rehearsal process, where Teddy and I are a team on the movement of the puppet, and we collaborate with the voice of Audrey II, Aaron and Kingsley before him, on the character of the puppet. And so Aaron really leads us now. Aaron really leads us in the tempo and he gives us the breath. that we need for the movement, right? And so when I approach it as making it my own, it's like, how do I interpret? It's like, how can I interpret this moment? How can I interpret what Aaron is doing and make it visual? How can I turn what he's doing audio wise into a sound, into a movement? And how can I give him something to play off of? How can I give Seymour something to play off of? Like, there's seems like an endless possibility of action that we can play and motion, motion that we can find in this puppet. And it really is a discovery process through play with Teddy and I about like, what can the puppet do? And when can we do it to like match what's happening? And so we'll be rehearsing or performing, or like in a moment something will happen organically, and it will get a reaction. We're like, ooh, or it gets a reaction from the audience, or it feels good to us, or like it really matches up with what Aaron's doing. And we'll talk to each other about it. We'll like, oh, Teddy was like, oh, I crossed my legs in this bit, and sort of put my nose up in a little huffy stance because Aaron's kind of giving us this little huffy feel to the words. And I'll be like, ooh, yeah, okay, great. I'm going to try that. I'm going to put that into what I do now. And I'll do the same thing with him and say, oh, I got the puppet to do this thing and it worked great, felt great. Try it out on the next one. I think like one of the ones that I'm really, really proud of is that when Seymour is feeding Oren's chopped up body parts to the plant, we have this like fake hand that gets fed. And I think originally we had this long tongue that was a sleeve that we wore, and then we opened up the puppet and like grabbed it with the tongue or whatever. And it always looked a little funny to me. It never felt quite right to me. And I sort of thought like, I think we can do something really cool here and like have the puppet Pod 3 like grab the hand, throw it in the air and catch it in our mouths and like have this very like cool moment. And I suggested it to Teddy and we like worked on it and we like got it to work, and it, is now part of the show. And it was
watching that for the first time was like somebody shooting a 3-pointer in the NBA finals. It was like at the buzzer. It was so incredible. The whole audience just erupted. And it was just rehearsal too, but everyone was like, that's it. That's the show right there.
Wow, yeah. That's awesome.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Can you just describe quickly where Aaron is in relation to you guys and how he's able to see what you're doing? Like, is he just watching you live, or is there a monitor, or how are you guys able to be as close as you are while he's off stage or whatever?
He is at the very back of the house, right behind, or kind of in the same place as stage management. So very far house right at the very top. So he's looking down at everything, and he has his own soundproof booth where he can see the full picture of the stage, and he's also got a monitor watching Will, our music director, for any musical things. He's got a whole soundboard there and cans on his ears where he can adjust everybody's feed. He can adjust the music or the microphones or the monitors, anything like that. And so he's able to fully see us. And I actually don't know if he has a monitor of the stage as well, or if he just sees the stage.
I think he does. I think there is a monitor there's a camera at the back of the house that gets a full picture of the stage for stage management, and they have it backstage, like they have that feed backstage. And we also get that feed in Pod 4. There's a little tiny 7-inch monitor behind the nose of Pod 4 so that we can see where we're pointing, just like you would have a monitor for a TV puppet. And it makes it just, possible for us to look at things with the mouth closed, basically. There's the only way that we can see live is when the mouth is open. So now that we have a monitor, we can like look at stuff on stage, which is really essential. But Aaron is in his booth watching us on stage, and we have in-ear monitors for him. So we have a very, very close, we can really track we can hear his breath, any little catch breath or prep breath that he's doing. Like, we follow that very, very closely because we have him right in our ears, which is super helpful.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I could imagine that being just like invaluable, because otherwise you're struggling with all the other sounds that you're getting. So to have just him is that's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been times where I'm like, this is very difficult. I feel like I'm kind of chasing him. I don't understand what's happening. It's like I realize, oh, I didn't put my ear in, and I just got flying in the dark.
Yeah,
it's all muscle memory now.
I've had the ears. I've had my monitors fall out during a Pod 3 performance, and it's just like, you kind of like have the wind taken out of you a little bit, and then you kind of have to like turn up your. Fortunately they pump the stage full of sound, and like it's a pretty loud show, but it's a different kind of, you kind of lose that subtlety of his exact and immediacy of his breath that really connects us to to his performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like having your readers knocked off of you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I got a question for you guys too. As you know, this is a show that's done all over the place. It's a really popular show done by high schools, community theaters, and a lot of times those whether it's the director or the production some way, they don't find a puppeteer. Either they don't try looking, or they just get someone to fill it.
Yeah.
And what I would ask to you is, obviously, first of all, I'd say to those directors and stuff, please find a puppeteer. But if someone receives that role with no experience, so what advice might you give them going into this?
Oh, that's a great question.
That is a great question.
I mean, I think that the first thing would be that if you are cast in this show as the puppeteer for Audrey 2 and you have no puppetry experience, you should approach it as if you were an actor cast in a show who had to play a guitar convincingly on stage, and you didn't know how to play guitar. It's an instrument that you need to learn how to do passably for the show, and so it will require it should require a little bit of extra attention from you as the puppeteer, and from the production, hopefully from the production in general, about some attention that good puppetry is part of what makes this show so special. And putting that extra energy into the production and into helping the puppeteer get a good performance and get the resources they need to practice, will take the show to a new level where the audience will forget. The audience will really dive even further into the story, this magical story of a man-eating plant.
Yeah.
I think lip sync is a big thing to practice, and I think it's it's the first easy thing to practice, because when you're not thinking about the mechanics of how lip sync works, then you can get back to performing while singing, which is you want to remember that this is an acting role, and that the job is not to necessarily get every single syllable, but to get every single acting beat to match. And you don't have to worry about, especially with big puppets that sing, I think there's a lot of emphasis placed, like in lip sync in general, and this is a bit of my soapbox, with lip sync in general, I think there's a lot of emphasis to like match every syllable with a movement. And I think that it is easier to practice and easier to learn and easier to connect with if you have an acting background, especially if you think about matching beats of a scene or acting moments of a scene and the breath of each of those lines, connecting the breath of those lines with the movement rather than syllables, because then it becomes less of a mechanical thing that you're worried about and more of an acting thing. And that's ultimately what will bring your audience in, will bring your character to life.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd have to agree on the acting front too, because I think that's like coming from an acting background myself. That's the thing that's helped me most in my puppetry career in general, and specifically this show, is like the ability to just like make a choice and see it does that play. I think that the other thing I would say to anybody who was jumping into this would be to get somebody else on the outside to watch you specifically, to be your ally, because honestly the hardest thing about it is like feeling like you're not being watched, or like you don't have anybody out there keeping you honest, or like you don't have anybody that's watching specifically you. And so if you are in a production where you don't have a lot of experience, I would say ask if you can get either like an assistant director or just somebody else on the cast, like who can be like a puppet captain for you, and just keep an eye on you and tell you what's working and what's not, because at the end of the day, like, you're alone in there and you can't tell if it's working. And so I'd say
right.
that, like, that's be your best advocate and find somebody else to just, like, watch you.
Right. It shouldn't necessarily be the work of the director or the choreographer to watch for the puppetry in the show. And so having a puppetry director or a puppet captain on the outside that can just be watching for that, and then communicating with the director, you know, how to whether what the director wants is being performed, or how to implement those, you know, work with the puppeteers on how to implement that, the overall picture of the show, which is what the director should be looking at.
Yeah, this is the soapbox I'll stand on now, is that it's just so imperative to have somebody else out there that's going to be able to have the director's ear to then say, you know, this is just not working. In a production I was in, I'm not going to say which one, but in a production I was in, the tempo for Get It was so fast. It was just cooking. And I said to them, listen, this is too fast. I'm not doing it. And like in my head, I was like, there's no way this can look good. Yeah. And the director was like, it's fine. So it looks great. And I was like, all right. And then somebody took a surreptitious video that during in the audience, and I caught it on YouTube a little while later, and I saw the video footage, and it looked terrible. I was like, this is way too fast, and I looked like a fool. And I was like,
it was on a Bad Audrey 2 Tumblr or something.
Yeah,
a Bad Audrey, exactly.
That's so funny. It's funny because I was just going to recommend that, because I think that's great advice to try to get someone on the outside. But one thing I know, being part of these productions, sometimes you just can't get somebody to do it.
It's
you know, so one advice that I've given people is just give someone your phone, exactly what you kind of just said, and try to watch it again. Just maybe if it's a high school, maybe it's your mom just doing it, because sometimes in those smaller productions you can't trust, like you said, the director and the choreographer, they're focused on other things.
That's right.
And we know, working with directors, make the arms move.
Yeah.
It does, you know,
right.
You know, and the other recommendation I'd say too, which I guess you guys touched on, which is so many people just come in and like focus on lip sync only, and I think kind of what you guys described is make it seem alive. Yeah, which is the most important part. So I think that's great advice, guys. Thanks so much.
I was going to say the other thing that I would say is it's not supposed to hurt. And I know that that's a sort of silly thing to kind of state, but I think it's a very real thing that we battle against as puppeteers, because we, especially in this show where we're dealing with big puppets and potentially new big puppets, very novel big puppets that if you have puppetry experience, it might be in TV puppetry, which is totally different, and you know, you might be fine with lip sync, and now you're switching into big puppets, and it's not supposed to hurt. There is a difference between, as a puppeteer, you really have to be aware of what you are doing that you can practice at and get stronger at, and what you're doing that is going to hurt you and your body. And you shouldn't be doing anything that causes you the kind of pain that will injure you. And it's very difficult to tell those two apart. So you have to be very aware of that all the time. And it's also good to make sure going into the show that you have a way of communicating your comfort level that you establish that communication line before you start the rehearsal process, so that when you feel something uncomfortable or you feel something painful, you're not stopping production, or it doesn't feel like you are the burden is on you, that you're like causing headaches for everybody else, and that somehow that would discourage you from speaking up about it. And it's really, really important, if you are figuring out how to do this big puppetry, that you are doing it in a way that doesn't damage your body, because your body will, you know, the idea is that your body lasts longer than this show, and is more important than this show, and is more valuable than any puppet. And, you know, like, it's really important to shift the value to that these puppets are not the show. These puppets are the tools for you to act in the show, and for this, a story to be told in the show. And the show is told by actors and puppeteers. And it's really important to, like, remember that when you're going into this, especially if this is being done by a production that has very little puppetry experience. It's a great way to get into puppetry. Like, having a show like this is a great. I love the fact that this is in so many different places around the world and in so many high schools, and it's a lot of times people's first experience in puppetry. And to that end, I kind of feel bad about this, like, Bad Audrey 2's Tumblr, where it's like, high school productions are not supposed to be, they're not supposed to be the end all be all of, like, the best puppetry in the world. Like,
I don't know if you've seen some of these. Some of these are pretty.
I have. No, I've totally seen it. Some of them are terrible puppets. But the thing
I've
is,
also seen worse downtown.
Yeah,
I've seen worse downtown in professional productions too.
But also, like, that's not the point of doing a high school
Sure,
production.
of course, yeah.
High school
Yeah.
production is, like, not to have the best puppets in the whole world. Like, if you do, that's great, but it's much more important to have an introduction to puppetry in a strong show that's written for puppetry, and to learn, just like you're learning to be on stage in high school. Like learning
You're capturing
to act.
people's imagination.
Yeah,
and love
learning
for
how
it.
to tell a
just
story.
to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Little Shop is what got me in my first production of Little Shop. Is
Exactly.
why I'm in puppetry now. That's what got me
Exactly.
into puppetry. Yeah.
And they were probably terrible puppets in that show, Adam. But it
They
doesn't
were
make a
actually good
difference.
puppets. They were actually good. I didn't make them. I didn't make them. I was just hired as a puppeteer, a side puppeteer.
Yeah.
But that's what gave me the puppetry bug from that moment being in that show.
Exactly. I think high school and community theater in general, I think it's really easy, especially because of how easy it is to share stuff on the internet. It's easy to forget, like, what the most valuable part of that is. And it's not to put on the best, most polished commercial production. That's what Broadway's for. That's what Off-Broadway's for. Like, that's where you want to go to see what you've discovered in high school with 20 years of experience and a much larger budget can do. And, like, there's inspiration on both sides. And the point is to inspire people and connect to people. Like, that's why we are doing theater in high school. It's like, there's so much more that's valuable about it than putting on a good show. This is like, if the point is to put on a good show, then that's how arts get devalued and removed from education. It's like, well, the point isn't to put on good shows. The point is to put people into theater and develop empathy and develop storytelling and public speaking and camaraderie and, like, collaboration, like all these other skills that are necessary for good, just people to have in general,
Yeah, it's funny. It's the same thing I say in my art class. Like, the goal of this art class is not to make beautiful art.
That's right.
That's a positive thing that tends to happen a lot, but it's to
That's
learn
right.
this process and to learn something along the way.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, that's beautiful. No, it definitely applies to that without a doubt. But I had another question for you guys, because one thing that I know that a lot of people might not realize is that when you're in Pod 3 in the beginning,
Yeah.
you're in that for a while before you. You're
It's
in that
true.
for a while before, and you can't move.
That's right.
Do you guys do anything in there? What do you do? Because I've heard stories about.
Well, we've got,
I've heard
do you wanna
about-
hear, Adam?
I've heard
We've got
people-
a bowling tourney, we've got a Netflix
No, honestly, I've heard
subscription.
about people falling asleep.
yeah.
My one buddy used to play his Nintendo DS in there.
I think
yeah.
there was a moment when we were staging this production when we were like, this means that you're going to be in there for a very long time, and is there any way that we can get around that? And actually, it became a great solution for the show that, like, the pod is presented during closed for renovation, and there's a whole bunch of scenes, and there's like this whole book scene, and then the walls close on the shop because there's a dentist song on the street. And that's the moment when we get into the pod, and then the walls come back open for Mushnick and Son, and get it, and then we're off to the races. So, like, we have reduced the amount that we're in the show because it's like, oh, well, there's no reason for us to be there for that long.
By a significant amount.
By a significant amount. Because
I was
it
going to say,
isn't-
I know my buddy had to be in there for that whole song too and
Yeah.
stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, it's such a long time.
Yeah.
Especially with hot lights on you, doesn't breathe well, and
Nope.
Exactly. It's not comfortable.
No.
And I think that was, again, like, that's a really important thing that, like, was just a really good sign that this production had our interests in mind, or, like, had us as people in mind. It was just like, yeah, you could get in the puppet here, but, like, there's no real reason. Sure, like, it makes a little extra work for the running crew to, like, lift the puppet up and put it back in exactly the right spot, and, like, there's a little bit that needs to happen then, but like, that's what we're gonna do, because this is a show that's not about stressing people out and not about, making the hardest track for a puppeteer. It's about making it so that we can perform and that we are not, exhausted and, full of our own carbon dioxide when we actually get to the point when we can perform.
Yeah.
So we can focus on being still, which takes a lot of energy. And
Yeah.
we can focus on listening and being ready, which takes a lot of energy. And that's what we do inside the pod.
Yeah, there was a production that I did where I did have to stay in pod 3 for all of that time because there was no moving parts of the set, and there was one time I fell asleep. I sort of nodded and I felt myself going, and I started, and I was like, I hope nobody caught that. But even still, like we are in there for Mushnik and Son now. And like a scene, and so we are in there for a little bit, and we did make it easier on ourselves. There once was a time where there were the 2 control rods in the mouth for pod 3 that you're kind of hanging on and situating yourself in the sitting position. There was this string that was wrapped around it between the 2 to kind of cinch them together so they didn't move, and so you could maintain. And then the downward pulling motion would keep it sort of closed. And even that was like still very stressful, and it was using some muscle. And then Eric was, I think, the one who was like, "Why don't we just use a clip? Why don't we just get a simple little clip in there that we can just buckle it, and we'll, we can apply a little bit of pressure at the end, surreptitiously unclip it, twiddle it through with our fingers, and then we're off to the races." So that also, like, little changes like that made it much easier to sit in there. But for the most part, the hardest part is honestly like not laughing during the scenes, because Christian Borle playing the dentist is like a comic genius, and he is also always trying to like keep it fresh and like react to the things that are happening on stage. So like, even though you got the rhythm of the show in your head, sometimes there are surprises, and you're in there and you hear him say something a different way, or you hear him start to laugh. Like he and Jonathan would make each other laugh all the time on stage. And it was a game they were playing, and so like sometimes you're in there and like trying so hard not to crack up while they're just like and they're right next to you. They're like 4 inches away, and like they're just like having a great time. And like there was one night especially where they were laughing, and the audience was laughing then because they were laughing, and it just was this cycle, and you're sitting in there like, please just go on.
I could see it being like being inside of a prison keeping tallies. Okay, point for Oren this time. And you look inside the puppet, there's lines everywhere. Point for Seymour.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. I got I guess gotta go on a small little tangent too. I got a little one little pet peeve I have, and this is not really puppetry related to the show, but is productions that have Oren's gas mask that like a poor design for Oren's gas mask, not even like aesthetically designed, but the thing is like it's supposed to look like it's stuck on him and can't come off.
Right.
And very often we see ones that can very obviously and easily. Why doesn't he just take it off? So that's one thing that I would say people should definitely look out for.
I love that that's what takes you out of the show, Adam. It's not the giant man-eating plant on stage. It's just that gas mask could clearly come off at any time.
I'm like, it's a piece of elastic around your head. Take it off.
You also have an issue with Audrey's teeth, right?
I think I
Oh
do.
yeah,
What
if
is
the
it?
Audrey
Remind me.
doesn't have good teeth and she's singing somewhere that's green, it can be a real thumbs down.
Sorry,
I can see the headlines now. Poor dental hygiene ruins beautiful community playhouse show.
She's dating a dentist, obviously.
Obviously.
Now we see why.
Oh gosh.
Good. You got me. on that.
The teeth for Audrey too. Yeah,
The teeth for Audrey too, and you saying specifically if the teeth are too pronounced, it's taken you out of it as well. Of like, who would put their head in a plant that has,
Well, because
like,
I built
sharp teeth?
built a set of Audrey 2 puppets as well, and I don't have any teeth in it. And my people say, "Oh, it doesn't look scary enough." I'm like, have that thing actually alive that big next to you. It's like it's like standing next to a rhino. Like, guess what?
Yeah.
I mean, the rhino's teeth might not scare you. They should probably, because like hippos are one of the most dangerous creatures in the world. But anyway, like the size of it is what's menacing. It doesn't need teeth, and they reach in and look inside, and like you see these huge teeth, and like you wouldn't do that. Again, I know I'm overthinking it. I know I'm overthinking it. It's
I
a
know,
show, but still.
I totally agree. No, I totally hear what you're saying, and I think that we should design an Audrey 2 with hippopotamus teeth, like the big round. I think Ours does have some pretty sharp, gnarly teeth on the inside. Only on the inside. There are some also that kind of like they have the teeth sort of showing on the outside, which I think can sometimes almost give away the sort of like ferocious nature of it. But before the game is afoot. But yeah, that is an interesting. That is an interesting trip hazard.
Yeah, so you always see like Audrey like feeding it, pouring it in, like these huge teeth. Some production, depending on how she has to get lifted up to be kind of eaten, they just have her like leaning into it with around these teeth. I'm just like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I think
maybe
it
that's
speaks
more
to
of a comment on Audrey and her mental state.
Well, again, you're also sort of what you're speaking to are the challenges in the show, the challenges that are baked into the show that people might miss sometimes. And like Teddy's saying, like there's a moment of surprise baked in, and if you miss it, like it's an opportunity lost. There's a moment of surprise baked in where it's like it's just a plant pod, and then it opens up and it's full of teeth. If you put the teeth on the outside, you're giving away that surprise moment, and that's an opportunity lost. And so the fun challenge of this show is, of any show, I think, is like mining the script for what those moments could be, and how are you best going to play them on stage? How are you not going to give away the surprises? How are you going to make it so that when Mushnik climbs in, it's a series of mounting poor choices and mounting tension that like adds to this moment of the show where Seymour is deciding to kill his father figure. Like that's the challenge, and not everybody gets those challenges, but that's the pleasure of trying to stage a show like this, where you are trying to find every moment of every morsel in the show and really and really bring it to life and present it to the audience in the most delicious way.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point, because I think that's what most of these Tumblr shows that we're talking about make the mistake of. They're trying to make it their own and original, but not by going back to the source material of the script, but by looking at what other people have done and tweaking it, not necessarily making sure that it's all like makes perfect sense in the world that the script has created.
I also think that it is sometimes a disservice to I think innovation and like interpreting a show on your own to your own to like emphasize your own story. There's lots of different stories in this show, and I think mining it and finding the one that really speaks to you and the audience that you're going to present it to is, you should absolutely be doing that regardless. And I think like I don't want to discourage anyone from interpreting this and saying like there's only one way that you have to do it. Certainly I've been a part of a lot of different productions that are interpreting source material. Like Teddy and I were both part of Madama Butterfly at the Met, which was a wild new interpretation by Anthony Minghella of this source material, and people had very strong opinions about how it's supposed to have been done. And I can't imagine a more beautiful way than this production we were part of. And I wouldn't want to see if everyone was always thinking like, oh, we always have to do it the way it's always been done, then we don't get any of that. We don't get any of that innovation. And we have to have the terrible productions that innovate something that drive this, that drive it forward and like keep it, that's how people are keeping it fresh. I also think that like, again, it's fun. The Tumblr page, the Terrible Audrey 2 page is fun to like, look at these wild interpretations, but it also is a disservice because we know as theater performers that a photo can never do justice to what it's like being in the theater. And so just being presented with a photo of this, like I have worked on very high budget shows or really popular shows that have an incredible puppetry in them. And the puppets are being held together with gaff tape and glue. And if you saw them in the light of day, they all look terrible. Like that's not the point. The point is like the experience of being there in the theater and like watching this thing in time. That's the show. And I think
there's a difference.
It's fun to see these Tumblrs, but it's also like it's important to remember that like it shouldn't be a discouraging. It shouldn't be discouraging to people who want to try something new.
Oh, I think it's super encouraging. Looking through that, like I get inspiration. But you're right. Sometimes you get So sometimes even ones that don't look good, maybe sometimes people design around the functionality because maybe
That's
they
right.
have a special way. That's
Yeah.
one thing they've noticed. Like some people like they want when Audrey's getting eating her feet to be up in the air and kicking. Well,
That's right.
if you're on a small budget in a small theater, like you can't do like a hydraulic thing. How are you going to solve that problem to make it work that way? And there's a different way. Maybe you have people in the grabbing branches that lift her up, or I've seen other interesting designs. To make that work, and sometimes you
Yeah.
pull little pieces like that, and no, it's interesting. It's a
Yeah.
good laugh too.
Actually, the puppet designer that I worked with on my first production of Little Shop, he had directed it also at the high school that he taught at, and I think they got around the puppetry problem by just basically they had a mouth. They had like the big Audrey 2 mouth that ate people. That basically I think opened up and people crawled in it. But then otherwise, it was just a kid at the top of this very phallic looking Audrey 2. Also, the pictures are kind of hilarious. But they had like it's just their face. Their face was exposed, and they were kind of this like tendril that then was like the speaking, singing part of Audrey 2, and like they, that's how they got past it with this particular high school production. It's like it
Yeah,
does everything you need to do, and you don't have to like.
There's a million different ways to build a puppet, and sometimes the best
yeah.
solution is to have very little actual thing that you are building, and to focus on the story and to focus on the strengths of your cast and what you can do with your budget. And I think it's especially with a show with such a long history, and like when you rent the show from MTI, when you license the show from MTI, it comes with an incredible packet of information about how to build Audrey 2s, and that Martin was a part of designing this, and like he created this packet so that people could create the puppetry for their productions. And I think it's an incredible resource, and like if you can do the puppetry, like do the puppetry. It's a show for puppetry. But also, there's a million different ways to make a puppet, and the backside of it is that people could go into it with the idea that like if I can't do the best puppet, then I can't do puppetry. And I think that's kind of against everything I've ever worked for in my career, to encourage more people to do puppetry and try puppetry, because even bad puppetry or like even unpracticed puppetry can be really life-changing, or can open up this tool for communication that you may not have had before, or a tool for the production to create a world where they may not have had something before. And I think that's really like it's a really important thing, and I can't say it enough. It's just like you can do great things with not the best puppets, and it's because of how you focus your energies. Because if you're focusing on the acting and the show and the moment, and that interaction between the audience and the performers, and the performers between each other, like that's what a show is about. And the puppetry can heighten that. But like having the best puppets in the world is not a requirement for the best puppet shows in the world.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and I hope MTI does have that stuff available, because last I checked, and I know it says it in the back of the script that there's a packet, and when you inquire about it, last time I did, they don't have it anymore.
Oh, really?
For a
That's
while.
a shame.
Yeah, for a while they got rid of it because I think they wanted to push their own rental
That makes sense.
affiliates that they were with. So, because I remember years ago, it was the first time, before I even knew Marty Robinson, I sent him an email like, hey, it says that there's a thing here, but it's not there. And then he found out that they got rid of it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they didn't want people just building more janky ones or whatever. I'm assuming that's what it was. But one thing is, I've done other school. I work at an elementary school. We have a school musical and whatnot, and then we go to this local award thing where all the kids perform one number from the musical, and it's against all the kids, and they bring in the actual people that write the junior MTI shows that make it for like elementary schools and middle schools and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I remember they said, "Oh, do you have any requests on shows that you want to be juniorified?" And I remember saying, like, can you please do a Little Shop one, like Little Shop Junior?
Little shop.
Little Shop.
Little Shop.
It'll be based on that cartoon in the 90s.
The guy's like, oh, we tried really hard, but we couldn't get it to work. Just like the relationship between Oren and Audrey, like it just couldn't really work. I'm like, I could make it work. Make me write it. Or I'm sorry, let me write it. Let me write it. I could make it work.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a schoolyard bully at the end of the day. He doesn't have to, like, you know.
Make it up. Yeah, you can make it work. You can.
Yeah,
you can make Music Man Junior. I know it's a different thing. Just like more so, I mean, when I see Music Man, because of how like. I don't look at Music Man and think this should be a kid's show. It's like what? No, it's like so adult.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sweeney Todd.
In so many ways.
Yeah,
Sweeney Todd Jr. Yes, that would be great. Oh God.
Mrs. Lovett bakes cookies instead. It's just a very different show.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, now that Adam has aired all his grievances about productions of
Yeah, Adam, sounds like you don't like this show at all. I don't understand.
You know what? It's like one of those things. You know, you're a real fan if there's things that you have problems with.
Absolutely.
but would love to just hear you know, in the time we have remaining, just if you guys could tell us a little bit about your work beyond Little Shop. You know, you're both actors and performers and puppeteers in your own rights, but just love to hear a little bit about how people can learn more about you and the work you do, and then we'll get into some good puppeteer stories.
Sure. Yeah, Teddy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm an actor and singer and puppeteer. And as far as like, I studied at the University of Connecticut, which is kind of like where I realized that puppets could be a real thing, like a real career, and like more than just Muppets. So I have to thank Bart Rockaburton for that. My first puppet, with a puppet experience that I remember was Into the Woods, and I was playing Jack, and I had this great Milky White, and it was a full person in a suit on these stilts, and Bart just gave me like the best advice. He was like, this puppet is only going to become alive if you believe it. You have to believe it, and then the audience will be with you the whole way. And I took that I took that so to heart, and that was like my main objective was like, just be like, make this cow your cow. And so
sorry, you were at UConn for like
I was
as
an actor.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
as an actor, I studied acting there. And then it was years later when I connected with Stefano Brancato, who had gotten his MFA there, and he said, "Hey, I'm in this puppet opera. You should audition for it." And that was this production of El Gato con Botas, the Puss in Boots, with Gotham Chamber Opera and Blind Summit Theater and Tectonic Theater Project. And then I met a bunch of amazing puppet artists in that, and we got to do a bunch of puppetry styles in that, sort of like Bunraku style and Humanettes, and there may have even been some shadow puppets. Yeah, there were some shadow puppets in there. And then so I got this kind of like crash course. And from there, I got introduced to the community in New York, and then got brought in for workshops and works in process that people were working on. And then it kind of just, it kept snowballing from there. And then eventually I got to do Madama Butterfly at the Metropolitan Opera, which is where I met Eric.
Wow. A little side note too. Milky White is another good Tumblr. Checking out those fails. Oh my god!
I have to check that out.
That one might be even better, honestly.
Is Tumblr even still around?
Well, it doesn't have to be typed. Just type in Milky White fails, Audrey Q fails, Little Shop, or no, Avenue Q fails. I might even be on some of those.
You are on
yeah. I'm sure that I have some bad production photos that are somewhere. Yeah.
Posted by Cam Garrity.
And I guess like most recently, what I've been doing, I've been working over the pandemic. I started taking some online classes with Puppets in Prague and Berndo Grodnik as well. He's got this Academy of the Wooden Puppet, as he calls it, and I've been kind of working on that and sort of like, you know, learning woodworking skills and learning about wooden puppets and mechanisms with those kinds of things, and it's been really great. That's the place I am right now, and kind of working with that, and eventually I think it'll pop up in my own art, but I'm just kind of enjoying like learning from the master right now, especially now that we're like going back into work. It's and working with puppeteers all across the world. It's this wonderful communal experience, and Bernd is an incredible puppeteer, and
he's amazing,
and just like a great ambassador for puppetry arts. He was just knighted for being in Iceland for puppetry, for his contributions to the puppet world, which is super cool. So I'm saying now that I'm like a puppetry squire.
I so badly want to have him on the show. But that's so great that you're getting to work with him like that.
Yeah, cool. And so I mean, I don't know if this is the time we're like plugging our websites or anything like that, or our work.
Yeah,
or
go
just,
ahead. For sure. I
mean, yeah, I don't have much on it, but there's more of my stuff at teddyudane.com. Just my name.
Awesome.
And some of the puppetry I've done and do there.
Eric?
And I am also a puppeteer.
You've come to the right place.
Yeah, I know. I have been a puppeteer now for about 20 years, actually. I went to Sarah Lawrence College and studied with Dan Hurlin, and then took my junior year at UConn and studied with Bart Rockburton, and also went to the O'Neill many years in a row. About that time, 2003, 2004. In there, was an emerging artist. Worked with Richard Termini, who was leading the emerging artist program at the time. And then right after graduating from Sarah Lawrence, I met up with Emily DeCola, who asked me to design Animal Farm the musical with puppets for Synapse Productions. And then shortly after that, we met up with Michael Schupak, and we moved into a studio in the East Village and started Puppet Kitchen in 2006. And then since then, Puppet Kitchen has been doing, puppets in. We design, build, perform, teach, coach puppets for productions all over the world. We've done some really incredible shows, and that's probably a story for another time. But in 2017, Michael went to Tennessee to work with Animax, and Emily has switched careers to become a social worker now, which is really amazing. And I run the Puppet Kitchen now, and continue to do design, primarily designing and assembling and project managing the teams who are building my designs, and then doing training and performing puppetry as well. So I have stayed thankfully, a little bit busy over the quarantine. I think I've been telling people it's kind of the first time in my entire career that I've ever done one thing at a time, which has always kind of been the dream. I guess now the dream is to do one thing at a time and also be able to eat. With that work. But so now I'm back to stacking a bunch of stuff. Puppet Kitchen is very busy. We just got done doing. I put some designs in the Tom Brown's New York Fashion Week show, which was very cool. I designed some Pegasus on penny farthings that were opened and closed his Fashion Week show last Sunday, a week ago. Awesome. Actually. Mm-hmm. And you can follow what Puppet Kitchen is up to, which is what I'm up to pretty much, at puppetkitchen.com. You can follow us on Instagram at The Puppet Kitchen. We do have a Twitter account, but it's pretty mild. Mostly we're on Instagram. And I also, over the quarantine, and I will pick back up, started an interview show of my own called Puppet Time Online, which we've had Adam Krudinger as a guest, and you might check that out. Started on Instagram Live, and now it's on YouTube, and there's lots of past episodes while we're on break, and then hopefully when we get into performances for Little Shop of Horrors, we'll pick up those interviews. And Cam, we gotta have you on.
Whenever you want me.
He loves talking, so
I do.
You got to.
No, and I do have to say, Eric, I can't remember the first time we met. I'm pretty sure it was at an O'Neill or maybe a P of A conference, but I was fanboying out so hard because when I was in college and I first got a Netflix subscription, one of the first things that I watched was the documentary Puppet, where you were working on Disfarmer with Dan Hurlin. And I watched that short or that film so many times, and then when I saw you in person, I was like, that's the guy. It was
that's the guy on the feet.
That's a great documentary too for people.
I wish it was
that.
still on Netflix.
It is a
It's
great
not.
documentary.
I tried finding it
anymore.
again too. Yeah,
but fantastic documentary. It was so
David
good, so cool to see you develop that, and you get some nice shout outs about the work that you did from Dan, and just seeing that whole performance come together.
Thank you. That was an incredible show. I love working with Dan. My first professional production was his production of Hiroshima Maiden, which was this incredible, heart-wrenching true story about 25 women from Hiroshima who came to the States in 1955 for reconstructive surgery after being disfigured in the atomic bomb. So, puppets. And, it was, again, totally spoiled me for how productions productions with puppets should happen. It was this incredible collaborative experience with some amazing performers and amazing collaborators, and we got to recreate that feeling a little bit with Disc Farmer, the next show that he did after that. And it really, like, having those experiences with Dan and like being brought up with like having Dan as my mentor, like really, I think put me in a great spot to, now that I am sort of becoming a leader and, you know, bringing people into productions, and like makes me want to be better, and like makes me want to, you know, do better with the productions, and that I can be responsible in. So I'm so glad that you saw that movie. It's, you know, such a great film, and also like a great view of like of what it takes to put on a puppet show, or what to put on a show with puppetry, and like all of the thought that goes into it. It's a really cool movie.
Yeah, I would definitely.
100%.
It's good medicine you can give to anyone who doesn't think that puppets can be taken seriously. If anyone ever thinks that, I would just direct them to that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, it's illustrated so perfectly.
Yeah. Dan does a really
100%.
incredible job of really making poignant puppet shows. They're not serious. I feel like he has lots of levity in his shows, but they are remarkably pointed, and they are really touching, and they are very moving puppet shows. And because he approaches puppetry from a totally different perspective. He has a totally different background in what he uses, like how he approaches puppetry and why he would use it. And it's as this tool of connection. It's as this tool of communication. And when you think of it that way, it really opens up so many possibilities, and it really you really sort of focus that magic that you feel when you connect with an audience member that way. Which is, as puppeteers, we all know that's really a really incredible moment, and it has so many opportunities. There's so many opportunities to make that connection.
Definitely. Yeah, he's another person I'd love to pick his brain. But,
Yeah.
you know, we'd love to hear if you guys have any stories, either from Little Shop or in your own work, respectively, of a time where things didn't go right and you shed some puppet tears.
Absolutely.
Teddy, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Yeah, I have a big one, and this was in Little Shop. It was we were doing Get It, and I was in Pod 3, and we had gotten this note from Michael Latini and Mark Petrosino of the Monkey Boys. You know, a performance note. They were like, you know, at the end, when he's singing, you're both going at it. You're like driving him hard. You can just really go for it. Really like rock that pot. And we were like, what are you talking about? And Michael Latini like seat belted himself into the pot and just got in there with the puppet and just started bam, 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 like rolling around. I mean, like just tossing himself around the stage, like strapped into this pot, like he was in like a rumble cage or and he said, yeah, you could just really go for it at the end, really rock. It's like, it's really sensational. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. Yes. And so we kind of added that into the performance. And there was one time during the run with Jonathan, it was like early on, I was in there and I was feeling the music and I was like, yeah, we're doing this thing. And I don't know if the seatbelt got like loose or something. I felt myself kind of slipping inside that seatbelt. And at the very end, as Audrey 2 was kind of like wailing and riffing, I was up there with a puppet over my head, and then I just went up and I kept going over to the side and kept going over and over and over, and I tipped boom right onto the side, like right at 9 o'clock, and I flipped over and I felt the pot underneath me just boom, like up in the air, and I was on the ground, and I was like, oh my god, I'm on the side, there's an audience there, and the music is blaring, and there's like kind of that silent moment before he goes, so go get it. And I was sitting there, and I kept trying to right myself, you know. I was like, maybe I'm just like a little, and I kept trying to right myself. So I was just flopping around like a fish, just flopping around like a fish in this pod, and my legs are flailing with these Vine pants on. Like the absurdity of the reality just came crashing down on me. But this is all in the span of like a half of a second, because then I'm like, I have my line, I have my final line, I've got to say, so go get it, like that's the thing. And I was just like, so go get it. I tried to like move the mouth. I think it was just like a carp like on land, just like gasping for air.
Oh my gosh.
And then there was the button, and I was just kind of flopping, and then as soon as he said, so go get it. I was like, I'm okay. I was like, I just had to let Jonathan know I'm okay. I'm safe. Like, no, I was thinking like they're gonna rush out on stage, but in that moment, I felt I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed that like this illusion that we had worked so hard to craft of this puppet being alive and it's so cool and badass and like we're this like rough and tough character, and then I unpotted myself. I just fell over, and then I was a guy flopping around in a puppet suit, and I thought I've ruined it. I've ruined this show for all these people. And
meanwhile, people in the audience are like, "That's so fucking cool! It like popped out of the plant. I've never seen it happen like that."
He's really going
absolutely.
For it.
He's really going for it. And Jonathan, to his credit, he's like the nicest guy in the world. I was like, Jonathan, I'm so sorry. And he said, that was amazing.
Yeah.
He's like, you were just giving so much and you fell over. He was like, you like pushed yourself to the edge and then you went over it. He was like, I've dream of doing that. And I was like, that's the nicest possible thing you could have said. But in my head, I was like, I've just destroyed puppetry. I've destroyed puppetry in New York for the next 20 years. Like,
oh my God, that's hysterical. Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned the seatbelt too, because some people might not realize you do need a seatbelt in that thing. You really do.
Gotta be.
Yeah, and if you didn't, then you would have just been a literal like person rolling around out there. That would have been really weird.
I did that for a rehearsal the other day. I forgot to strap in, and we just going for it. And I was slipping and sliding, and the legs were going. And I definitely
you wouldn't
had to,
think so, but yeah, you really do. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 30. I don't know how much that pod weighs. It's like 15 anywhere between 15 to 30 pounds over your head, and like you get a little top heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hysterical. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eric, how about you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I will preface this by saying that I feel like every project I work on, I get to a point about halfway through when I feel like everything is terrible, nothing is correct, I'm bad, and every decision I've ever made is the worst decision, and nothing is going right, and I'm ruining puppetry forever. That happens on every project I work on, and I've worked on a lot of projects. So, at first, earlier in my career, I was like, how can I fix that? How can I avoid that feeling? Now I know that feeling is unavoidable. That is part of the creative process, and now I just have to just realize in the moment that that's what's happening, and that I'm just halfway through. But there have been some actual puppet tears shed in my career. Very early on in Puppet Kitchen days, back when Emily and Michael and I were much more involved in the building and than we were later on, we were doing props for a movie, like an actual, big budget movie, so to speak. It was called The Oogie Loves Big Balloon Adventure. And I encourage you all to look up that particular film. It's a real treat.
With the great Christopher Lloyd.
It had real star power. Christopher Lloyd, Carrie Elways, Cloris Leachman. I mean...
To say nothing of the Oogie Loves.
However, so we were making props for that show. There was like a funny telescope and a rocking horse and all this stuff. One of the things that was on my plate was some self-drinking milkshake glasses. You'd fill it up and it had a tube in the bottom, and the design of it had this really beautiful, like, white ombre going from the bottom to the top, these giant crystal, plastic glasses. But the budget that we had for our show only allowed for us to get, I think, just one glass, like one of these plastic glasses for the show. Like, we didn't have any backups. And then we were trying to create this ombre with some spray paint to so we basically had one shot to do this thing. It was in the middle of this very stressful build and probably three other projects at once. And I have a very clear memory of like being in the spray booth, the old spray booth at the old Puppet Kitchen, tucked in the back corner with my spray paint and these three glasses. That's like, this is our shot. And I like sprayed it. I was doing this thing. I was doing my thing. I was like being very careful, like really going for it. You kind of have to have a bit of confidence to go into it. And I like did it. And then the bottom of the can, I think, nicked the one of the glasses and like had a big line running through it. And that was the straw that broke me. And I like had to take a break. And I walked out. I'm like tears streaming down my face, like so embarrassed. And looking back on it, like, that hardly seems worth it for the self-drinking milkshake glasses in the Oogie Loves Big Balloon Adventure that were probably on screen for like 3 seconds in a movie that, you know, let's be honest, not a ton of people ended up seeing. But that was what really got me, and that is what I'm shedding puppet tears over. Like, in retrospect, it seems so silly, but it was everything in that moment.
Yeah, of course.
Like, spray painting those self-drinking milkshake glasses was my career. And
I think,
and like that's that moment where everything felt wrong, everything felt terrible, everything was like the lowest point of the low. And of course, we made it to the other side. We found a way to fix it. Michael Schupak was very helpful, and Emily was very supportive, and like bringing me out of it. And like being surrounded by supportive people is the only way to really get through that, or it's a very good way to get through that, where you are going to have these moments where you feel terrible about the work that you're doing, and you can get yourself through it. You can keep working and just keep going, and you will climb back up, and it will. But it is so much better, so much easier to have great collaborators and friends to work with who can pull you out of that. So that's my puppeteer stories. I'm very eternally grateful to my collaborators and my friends and Emily and Michael, you know, for helping me through so many of those moments. And like, I will also say, we've had some pretty rough, I mean, like, Little Shop is great. It was a hard rehearsal process, and like figuring out how to do these puppets is very, like you mentioned, it's a very physically taxing show. And the amount that, because Teddy and I are covering each other's tracks, the amount that we are sharing notes and giving notes to each other, and like literally and like emotionally and physically on top of one another most of the time, or dependent on each other. Like when you're in pod 4 and you have the other person on the counterweight, you're physically dependent on that person to sustain your body so that you don't pull muscles and break yourself in this giant thing. And I got to say, like, it was a huge stroke. It probably wasn't luck. I'm sure that, you know, the casting was done in intentional ways, and they knew that Teddy and I knew each other. But like the fact that Teddy and I have such a close relationship, and that we have a like unbreakable bond of trust, it like was essential to being able to do this show with the rehearsal that we had. Of course, you can develop that with your collaborators, but like Teddy was already one of my favorite people going into this rehearsal. And I was so excited about being on the show, but I was so excited to work with Teddy that going into this rehearsal made the puppet tears that happened during this rehearsal period, when I didn't think I could do it, and every choice I was making was wrong, or I wasn't strong enough, or I just like having Teddy around, and again, the supportive cast, but like made it possible to get to this point where I'm super proud of the work that we're doing. We have an incredible show to give to the audience, and I'm really, really excited about coming back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
So great.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And you guys, you shared with us the best way for people to follow you earlier, but what's the best way for people to find out more about this show and whatnot?
I believe the website is littleshopnyc.com.
That's right. I believe they're also on Instagram, Little Shop NYC.
Yeah, all the social media is Little Shop NYC, and we also have a cast album out that you can get on iTunes and Spotify, and I think other places as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can hear the original Off-Broadway cast, or the original Off-Broadway revival cast.
That's right. And me, I don't sing in this show. Big secret, I don't actually sing at all in this show. And they included everybody in the cast, a lot of the understudies and and me, to sing on the cast album. So like I can be a part of this, and I won't hesitate to say Grammy nominated album.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Oh, yes, of course.
That like what a treat, what a joy to be able to work on this, and again is a real testament to the nature of this production, that like really cares about their performers, and you know, creates this really collaborative, playful environment for us all to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's also, just recently, we did a performance. There wasn't any puppetry involved, but we just recently did a performance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. And so you can go on YouTube and find that on their YouTube as well. We do a performance of Little Shop of Horrors and Skid Row. with Jeremy Jordan with our new Seymour in there as well, so that you can get a sneak peek of the show.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so everyone definitely check it out. Opens September 21st.
It opens tomorrow.
Opens tomorrow.
At the West Side Theater.
Woo! And is there an ending for this run time? Is it only for a limited time?
Tickets are on sale through January 9th, but if it was anything like last time, they will hopefully release new blocks of tickets as we go.
Yep.
Wonderful.
So
Excellent.
there is plenty of opportunity. Definitely go get your tickets now. And we are, everyone, there is a vaccination requirement for audiences as well as cast and crew for productions nowadays. And our production especially, because we're a bit of a smaller production, I think we are able to sort of demonstrate what theater in this new era can be. And we're doing really well. Like, we get twice weekly testing. Everybody's vaccinated. Like, there's really good protocols and safety protocols in place. And so so that audiences can come back. And it's really, really exciting that the producers have banded together with other producers of other shows, and everybody and Equity has come up with ways that theater can come back in a safe way. And our production, I think, is doing an especially good job of making sure that can happen. It's a perfect show to come back to. It's a joyous show. It's a silly show. The talent in the show is incredible. The singing and the dancing and the puppetry is amazing. And it is a really good, and it's about an invader from another world taking over the planet. So it's prescient and silly at the same time.
A little close to home, yeah.
Yeah. Saying it that way. Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks
Wonderful.
so much, guys, for coming on the show.
Yeah, Eric Wright, Teddy Udane, Cast a Little Shop. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for having us.
We're at the end of another episode of Puppeteers, but the fun doesn't stop here.
Visit puppeteers.com for show notes and links to projects mentioned in this episode.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at PuppeteersPod, where we're posting new things every day.
Puppeteers is edited by Matt Bowen and made possible thanks to viewers like you.
If you enjoy this content, you can join our incredible Patreon patrons who are supporting the show for as little as $1 per episode. Those folks get access to early releases, uncut episodes, official Cup O tiers just like we use on the show, and could even submit interview questions for our guests. Go to patreon.com/puppeteerspod to learn more.
Another great way to support Puppeteers is rating and reviewing us on iTunes, leaving a comment or subscribing to this channel, or tell a friend about your favorite episode.
Thanks again for joining us on Puppeteers Puppetry Shop Talk, in-depth interviews with the world's most passionate puppeteers.
Hosted by me, Adam Krutinger.
And me, Cameron Garrity.
What's the
Okay.
date for Little Shop taken?
The 21st.
21st, on September 21st, right?
Yeah.
21st.
Well,
The 21st
we
day. on
we
the
learned
first
last
day.
time, though, that it's the 23rd day in the movie.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah, it's 21st day in the script of the show, but then somebody was like, it's the 23rd day, and I was like, what are you talking about? And then they sent me a clip from the film, or a copy of the script from the film, and I was like, that's the weirdest change that could have possibly been
Really
made.
is. Especially 21 has such a great story. It's such a good storytelling number as
Yeah.
opposed to 23.
I wonder if it's going to sound first, third, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe a thing like that.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
weird.
On film, just the thirds reads much better.
Yeah.
Jeez, we're going to change that. It's probably
the
sound guy on
enunciation.
set.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Frank Oz hates the number 21.
Oh, right, yeah.
Little known fact.
Yeah. You heard it
Wait,
here
was the
first,
20,
folks.
23rd like
That's
Jim's
right.
birthday or something? No, when is it? Isn't it in September though?
It's the 24th. But
Oh, it's the 24th.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's close.
Look closely at every Muppet movie.
That.
You'll see there's never 21 Muppets in a scene at any given time.
And all the calendars have that day just totally torn out,
just
Yeah.
yeah.
burned away with a cigarette.